Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. I'm your host, Victor. I always forget that part. I'm your host, Victor. And on this podcast, we discuss something we've been watching, usually a TV show, usually week to week, hoping to introduce all of you to something new to watch and with some recommendations and camaraderie and humor along the way, hopefully. So, now a little bit of news off the top. I have to assume that your husband is very excited by this turn of events with the Knicks. I didn't even know if they would make it out of the first round of the playoffs. For them to go and beat the Celtics in both nail-biting games, but away, that's pretty exciting. Now, coming back home, does he have tickets to the game?
He doesn't. He had tickets to one of the first round games where the Knicks could have clinched but didn't. Now, this round, he's sitting out. I think if they I don't even want to say it out loud, but I think if they move on further, he may get tickets for one of those games.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to jinx it, but it does look pretty good. They're coming home. Anyway, but we'll see. We'll see. I mean, exciting news.
Super exciting. And this is, why you can never, once you're a Knicks fan, you're a Knicks fan for life because they do stuff like this. They break your heart and then they do stuff like this.
They break your heart for over a decade, and then maybe it's rough. It's rough.
Long stretch. Yes.
I mean, I think that speaking of your friends and neighbors, I think we have the entire relationship of this couple. Their 15 or 18-year relationship since the Knicks have advanced beyond this round. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. A couple of things I did sample. Have you watched any of, we didn't cover this on the podcast. I put a pin in it. I even put it into our month preview episode for May, The Four Seasons, the show, The Four Seasons, which didn't even realize until I started watching it. But the very first scene is the Tina Fey's picking up her husband. He's a teacher somewhere in New Jersey because they crossed the bridge George Washington Bridge into New York. So they're somewhere near where I live, actually. This fictional family, this is anyway. Did you watch any of the Four Seasons? This was the number one show last week, by the way, in America.
It's like either there's nothing to watch or there's everything to watch.
Yes.
And so right now, I am working my way through the final season of You.
Oh, nice.
Which I was dying to binge watch, and I finally had to come to terms with the fact that I am never going to have the time to binge watch this. So I just got to squeeze it into like these spare minutes that I find here and there. And then after that, I want to watch the Four Seasons. And then after that, I know this is not your cup of tea and completely moving genres, but there's a new season of The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives out. So,
of course.
So
there's always another season of some of those shows.
That is my priority list right now. And I don't know where I am in this final season of You. I'm just turning it on whenever I can. I have no idea how far I've gotten through it. But after I am finished with this, then I will be moving on to the Four Seasons. And I'm very much looking forward to it.
It's pretty short. I watched just the 2.5 episodes, maybe three episodes of it. And what I would say is I don't know if I'm going to keep going forward with it. It's not bad. It's not enough to motivate me. But I would say, for example, like if you wanted to watch it with your husband or something, it probably would be something that you can watch. It's a pretty casual watch. It's not as funny as 30 Rock or something, although it has a lot of the talent, the behind the scenes talent of that. And there are moments that, some pretty tough moments in the series where they're talking about, being later, decades into a marriage and the realities of that. So there is some meaty topics there. There are some, there's the possibility of madcap comedy as well, but it all seems a little, it doesn't want to be too serious, so it doesn't dig into those themes even as much as, for example, this show does, that the one we'll be discussing today. And it's not as funny as it could be. So for me, it's very middle. It's like kind of like I'm literally at a moment where at this point, I could really take it or leave it. Like if I binge the rest of it, it's a very easy watch. They're like 20 something minutes per episode. You can watch the whole thing. It's like in the amount of time of a long movie. I honestly, this is not a great compliment, but this is the type of thing I can imagine just having on, like me and my
Mm-hmm.
wife while
I
we're
get it.
hanging out and just having it on. And that is a sufficient, that is a deep enough engagement with it. So take that as you will. If you're looking for that type of show, then this will fit the bill. And you could tune in like, oh, that was a good scene, and then kind of drift away. So it's,
Yeah,
and
well, this is the issue for me with a binge watch is that I have so few large blocks of time
right.
that if I'm going to watch multiple episodes of something, it actually has to be something that I can kind of have to have on in the background.
Yeah, and you could, like I said, that minus the credits, each one of these scenes episodes is under 30 minutes. So you could totally, for example, watch half of an episode during, like a break in a meeting, and say like, "Oh, I left on this juicy moment." Like you didn't. You left it kind of like in the middle of a conversation that's very
Right, right.
similar to the previous conversation. So you could very much casually watch this, and that's, I guess. There is a type of, and I'm not a fan of this type of TV watching, by the way, but that is definitely a type of TV watching, which is much more low stress. Like, for example, if we were going to cover it here on the podcast, I mean, I don't know what we would talk about. We'd probably just talk about some very general themes about getting older, which of course we could empathize with, definitely, midlife crises across the board. So we could actually have that. But it's not like something that you need to dig into deeply. But like I said, that's a kind of a recommendation of its own. So it's a very much a Netflix show. Let's put it that way.
Hmm.
Oh, and one last thing that just premiered yesterday. I've only seen 1.5 episodes of these, and I am loving it. Sona, Poker Face is back.
I saw a commercial. It seems like they have a lot of great guest stars.
The first episode is written and directed by Ryan Johnson. The second episode is written and directed by Natasha Lyonne, and it's
Hmm.
very solid, by the way, although I haven't finished it yet. But the Ryan Johnson one's especially funny. It catches us up on where the character is at this point. If anybody doesn't remember, she's basically running away from all the mobs in the country. And it's like a montage that is like a Looney Tunes cartoon. She literally is, settled in at some new job, and she's finally made a new, friend group. And then she'll be like drinking some, literally this happens multiple times. She's like drinking out of a glass of water or having a beer or whatever. And the drink gets shot out of her hands by the mobsters that are hot on her
Oh
heels.
my
And so
gosh.
it's like something out of like a Looney Tunes cartoon. And then she somehow, although they're 25 feet away from her, she's able to escape to the next segment where she is now like in a completely other state. And the same thing happens over and over again, kind of like catching us up on where she's been in the past a year or whatever it's been. It's very funny. It's literally like something out of a Looney Tunes cartoon. And that first episode is so entertaining. Cynthia Erivo. The one mistake is that she doesn't get to sing, by the way, but Cynthia Erivo gets to play quadruplets that were stars when they were
Wow.
child actors. So she gets to play all these different versions of herself. Very, very funny. The first episode was an utter blast. And the second episode, which I'm in the middle of now, is stars Giancarlo Esposito as this mortuary owner, and which is a set of a movie that's being shot there, and how he hides a murder inside the actual murder that's being shot inside of the funeral parlor itself. So really smart, entertaining stuff. Natasha Lyonne's even more comfortable in the role now. A lot of fun. And this is very entertaining so far. And it just started yesterday, and it's going to run for 12 weeks or 12 episodes. So I guess they did 3 episodes initial drop, and then it goes week to week. So anyway, it'll be on for months. I'm sure at some point we will discuss some of it as we go forward in the course of these next 3 months or so. One last thing before we get into the breakdown of the episode, we got an email from Kelly. Thank you, Kelly. And in the email, she just mentioned that we had called out how weird it was to see Sam putting on those wedge. Is that a wedge? I don't even know what a wedge is,
Yeah,
but
it
that
was a
looks like a
wedge.
wedge.
Mhm.
I never really thought about wedge heel, but then I'm like, that looks like a wedge. That must be a wedge heel. The shoe, this that we saw Sam strapping on. And what she had mentioned was that she also thought it was odd. So what she thought was going to happen would be that we would be seeing those shoes at some point in the future as a clue, like, someone's hiding under a bed or something.
Good point, Kelly.
And yeah, so Kelly, very good point. I actually thought that might pay off in this very episode. It does not, but it may pay off in the future. So I did want to call that out. And of course, any feedback you guys have for us, we'd love to hear it. Needssomeintroduction@gmail.com or on our YouTube comments as well.
I notice you avoid saying the other format.
Well, I mean, you can feel free to give us a review on Apple Podcasts, but that's not a good communication point. So actually, if you do want feedback, like back and forth, those are the ways to go. Everybody, if you just want to broadcast, then sure, go with the reviews. And we do appreciate. I can't hold
my tongue. If you would just like to share how much you hate me, go for it.
We haven't had any hate towards Sona in quite some time, actually.
So. I haven't checked there recently because I'm so scared. So thank you for telling me.
I have, yeah. You know what? We've gotten a few more 5-star reviews on.
Love it.
I should say 5-star ratings. We have not had any new reviews recently, but if you'd want to give us a review, we love those as well, as long as they're positive or constructive. You know what? They don't have to be positive.
I agree. Yes, constructive would be fine.
Yeah. All right, Sona. So before we break down the plot here, I mentioned to you in a text message, this might be the shortest recap we ever have of this show, or perhaps the longest.
Yeah.
Because I've been misjudged that sometimes. I remember one time in a White Lotus recap, I said, this is going to be our quickest conversation. And I think it went for 2 hours. So we could have a similar situation here because from a plot standpoint, this is pretty straightforward. But not only positive things to say about it, some negative things I have to say about it that might lead to some longer digressions. This episode is called The Things You Lost Along the Way. What did you think of this sixth episode of the series?
I had so many feelings during this episode about the plot and the show itself, because there were times I thought, wow, what a way to bring the plot to a screeching halt.
Yeah.
To, leave your home location and have, I wouldn't call it a bottle episode, but you get what I'm saying, right? Yeah. Like they've changed locations and there's just a lot of stuff going on that is certainly interesting and some of it enjoyable to watch, but not, kind of to me, it was a further deviation from what I thought this show would be.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then, in the last 5 minutes to just bring it back on message in a big way.
Well, there's a Sopranos episode, right, where they go, where Tony takes his daughter.
What a good point. Yes, which is like a really infamous Sopranos episode. Exactly. I can't remember the title of it right now, but yes.
Yeah, it has a famous name too. And same thing, I can't remember off the top of my head, but a very famous episode. And of course, also is like kind of like, let's step away from the mob storyline and have this father-daughter time. And of course, that also has kind of a shocking twist at the end. So yeah, I think that maybe that was on the mind of the showrunners when they made this episode. But in general, I have the same opinion that for the first time, maybe in the show, or maybe not the first time, but most prominently ever, I felt the show really straining at these two, personas, these, the split personality the show has, where it's almost as if I'm starting to feel the construction of the show where I joked that this could just be the Fleischman is in trouble with people breaking into people's homes.
Yes.
And there's that version of the show, which very much the show is very comfortable in that groove of, this possible reconciliation between this couple revisiting their youth at Princeton. And there's that part of the show, which works pretty well still, although some of the family dynamics seemed to be strained, to be honest. But overall, the show seems comfortable there. And then being like, and there's this murder mystery investigation going on. And I'm like, it was jarring. I mean, the intentionally jarring at the end of the episode, but jarring along the way as well. The show seems to, the shape of the show for the first time, maybe, or maybe most prominently was uneven, to say the least, in this particular episode.
Yeah, I think you make a good point about the murder investigation, because as I'm sitting here recalling the points of the show that that really stuck with me. The murder investigation is at the bottom of the list.
Right.
But we spent a significant amount of time there.
A lot of time.
So I'm not sure what that says. And I think I also struggle as a middle-aged person. I found, originally I blamed story construction and character development for me not being interested in the lives of teenagers. But now I'm thinking maybe it's just my age. I just don't care about kids that much.
Right.
Like for the amount of time we're spending with them. You know what I mean?
I agree that we are spending a lot of time with their personal dramas, and it hasn't paid off yet. The most generous read I have for it in previous episodes is that there's a correlation being made between Allie.
Yeah, I remember that.
And Coop, and the paralleling of those things.
Yeah.
And in that way, I do like that it's almost like a way for us to have additional insight into Coop by seeing this role played onto this earlier generation. But I agree, at this particular case, to have like scenes where they are the central protagonists, just specifically in the last episode, not seeing that this is yet another headache he has, that his son has now gotten into this situation, but actually spending time and him developing this relationship with this new girl and all of that is way less interesting. And like you said, it's just like, do we need this additional thing in the plot? And and I'm not sure if we do. There's stakes there, obviously, for him as well. But all of this, all those things you're mentioning are what I'm bumping up against the awkwardness of the show. This is another thing that I bumped up against for the first time in this particular episode, which was the show is very overwritten and written in a very specific tone. Yeah. And because John Hamm is so good at pulling that off, even in this very awkward narration, and even the narration, I'm like, okay, it's overwritten, but we're used to hearing John Hamm like sell cars during NFL games and stuff. So it's an extension of that persona of his. So all of that works really well. But then all of a sudden, when Sam is at the makeup counter speaking in that exact same tone, I'm like, okay, two things. One is, not because Olivia Munn is a bad performer. I think, as a matter of fact, has some of the best scenes in this whole entire show. But when you're giving her that density of dialogue, I'm not sure she can pull it off the way John Hamm can. And she shouldn't have to. That's not her character. So it's an awkward, and maybe for the first time, the writing in the show, I bumped up against it a little bit too. All that being said, I did like this episode.
I agree with you. I agree.
So let's start with the murder investigation subplot here, because it is actually really a big chunk of this episode. And like you mentioned, it's jarring that we keep jumping back to it after spending the whole opening segments of it.
Yeah, for whatever reason, this didn't feel as high stakes as it should to me.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's another issue possibly with the show. I still feel like the show is, and maybe this is something I just have to get used to. I never used to watch TV this way, but now I do because of this podcast. But I'm always thinking about the construction of the show. And for this season of the show, unfortunately, maybe this is unfortunate, I feel that maybe what we're seeing here is something that is like endemic to a lot of these streaming shows, that this is a setup season. So, a lot of times oftentimes these shows don't come back for a second season. This one is definitely coming back for a second season since they're currently shooting it. But a lot of times I have a critique that they'll shoot a show of a season, which is the setup for the show. And I feel now I'm starting to feel with some of these bumps along the way that it's not really about delivering closure to any aspects of this show in season one. It's about setting up season two, where he may be a prime suspect in some string of crimes, and he now is becoming more of a proficient thief. He's blackmailing people, etc. All of that might be season two, and this is all the awkward growing pains of him getting to that level, which is a little unfortunate because that's not my preferred formula for a show. I'm of the mind that give me a really satisfying season one, and then I'll want a season two. Don't set up season two like the show you want to watch is coming next year. I'm like, well, if it comes back, which happens unfortunately a lot with these shows.
I don't mind a setup plot or two, but I don't want a whole setup season.
Agreed. Ever heard this tweet? It's a very famous tweet about Surf Dracula. Have you ever heard this?
I have no idea what you're talking about right now.
I'll read it to you because it's very fun. This is someone posted this on Twitter, and it's become a famous tweet. And it says, back in the day, if you did a TV show called Surf Dracula, I'm reading this literally, you'd see that fool surfing every week in new adventures. But in the streaming era, the entire first season got to be a long ass flashback to how he got the surfboard until he finally get to see him surf for the last 5 minutes of the last episode.
I can't believe I've never seen that. I consider myself so attuned to pop culture.
Yeah, so this unfortunately may be a Surf Dracula situation.
Oh boy.
So we're seeing him become Surf Dracula instead of seeing him be Surf Dracula, which is true. Actually, this is such a funny observation, right? Because you think about when we used to watch, just network TV when we were growing up, and there would be like Manimal or something. Like this guy can turn into different animals, and like you got his whole backstory in episode 1, and then this was network TV. Then you have 25 episodes of that guy turning into an animal and solving crimes, right? And now it's like you might see that for 5 minutes at the end of the first season of the show.
Did Manimal actually solve crimes as an animal?
I think I don't know.
That sounds crazy to me.
I didn't actually watch Manimal. You have to,
like a crime-solving tiger?
He literally turned into a tiger. He turned into birds. He turned into like an owl so he could spy on people. I don't know if he solved the crimes I don't know if he ever showed up as an owl with a little note in his paw. But that would be great to see though. Or a tiger. A tiger just rolls in. It's like, oh my God. Oh, no, don't worry, everybody. It's just Manimal. I hope it's Manimal. Yeah, the good old days of network TV. By the way, speaking of Poker Face, that's a compliment I want to make to it, is that Poker Face very much functions like old school TV. Like if you watch season 1, the setup is in those first couple episodes. And even in those first couple of episodes, there is a mystery that's solved in it, even as the stakes are defined, who the real villain is, what's the real conspiracy is all defined in the background. And then she's on the road meeting new people every single week. Like it's just like old school TV. To its credit, I mean, I like that type of I know one of your favorite shows is like Psych. Psych functions that way, right? Like you set up his whole setup of what he does is in episode 1. Then we find out about the relationship with his dad, and those flashbacks and stuff come in just a minute here or there throughout the course of the series of the show. But primarily he's just in another, situation every single week solving crimes. We don't wait till the last episode of season 1 of Psych for him to be like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to use my powers of observation to pretend that I'm a psychic investigator. He's doing that in episode 1.
It jumps right in. Yeah.
Right. You heard it in the title. Let's jump in. So maybe this show needed a little more of that. I mean, I don't mind the setup, obviously, because there's a lot of richness to these characters and such. But, it needs to be in full stride at this point. For me, I would have preferred, I would say, that it would be in full stride right now. And I feel like it's not going to be in full stride until maybe the penultimate episode. I mean, we're getting close to the end of the season here at this point.
I mean, in fairness, I think he did steal something in the first episode.
He did. That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, it's a different show that I'm describing, but him getting to this point of pulling off some of these bigger heists could have been done with flashback and, 1 or 2 episodes setup rather than the amount of setup we've had here. But it is balancing, right? Being a character-driven show and this, right? Talking about The Sopranos again. Sopranos weren't about Tony killing somebody every single week on The Sopranos, right? Most of it was a family drama with the inconvenient, mob murders occasionally. But something it pulled off much better than I think this show has so far, right? It's only, we're not even 1 season into this show. So we'll see if it gets better. But once again, let's go back to that investigation aspect of it. So Rebecca Lynn, obviously this is shocking. This is a murder in this very affluent neighborhood. I like that the cleaning lady is the one who does the discovery in the first place. Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, considering that they're becoming a bigger part of the plot here. And this is definitely a professional hit. So this is not like an accidental shooting. We do find out that Paul has discharged the weapon. He has residue on his hands, although the gun is missing. So that's another interesting point. Do you want to speculate on who might have committed this murder?
Well, this is one of the reasons that I was surprised I didn't find the murder investigation part as riveting as I expected to, is because I had not ruled out that it was Mel. Not Mel, Sam. I keep messing, two women with nicknames that are more masculine. It's confusing for me. Okay. I had not ruled out that it was Sam, although maybe after this episode I have. But the sequence of events, you'd think I would be really in tune with what she is saying and how she's acting. But for whatever reason, it just didn't hold me. So I don't know that I really have any other suspects. What are you thinking?
Paul discharged a weapon. So did Paul kill himself? Was this a suicide? And then the, two shots to the side, which don't coincide with a suicide, was a faking a murder because maybe like the insurance doesn't pay out or something if it's a suicide. I don't know. I don't know how that works, but that's another possible theory.
It seems excessively violent. Like it does seem like not a casual accidental hit, but you know what I mean? It seems like someone had is trying to avenge something from the way they described it.
But during the investigation, this investigator, Rebecca, is sharp enough to also notice that someone's tried to clean up with some bleach, some part of the crime scene.
Yeah, she smells the ammonia, she says.
And one of the investigations, she's very sharp. I like that we actually have a smart detective here. I don't like when the detectives are just morons and jump to conclusions, which she could have fallen to that stereotype. There's that early investigation where she comes in and she says, "Oh, you probably misplaced the watch." So, and by the way, it makes sense, right? Like her theory is completely logically true. What thief is going to take one watch and not another?
Also, this seems like a place that would have very few violent crimes. So
right, exactly.
I don't think she would necessarily be that experienced in homicide investigation, depending on where her career has taken her.
She seems pretty excited about it, though.
I mean, can you imagine the novelty of that when you're used to dealing with like trespassing or whatever?
Another cover here is that everybody, this is actually interesting, the way that these type of things happen. Everybody always has these theories on that someone's rich or something. They're like, oh, he got all his money he's got mob connections or, so you can imagine all the rumor mill around Paul, which may be legitimate, who knows, but that this is part of feeding into these conspiracies that it's, oh, he borrowed money from the wrong guy. Little they know, or maybe she may even suspect possibly that there's a connection here between the thefts that have been going on and now this murder. I was going to mention something about the investigation. I do like the fact that they also explain, like, well, you're the neighbor. And they're like, oh, yeah, Paul shows up. He's in and out of here all the time. So then weren't so surprised by that. She asks, well, why wasn't your security on? And this obviously is very true, by the way. It's just like when you're home, you don't have the security running all the time, unless they have Ring cameras. This funny thing about the Ring cameras, because the Ring cameras obviously are on all the time, 24/7. But he does have that little device, right? I mean, now know that he can scramble those cameras if he knows where they are. But not when he's running through the neighborhood, by the way, when he was escaping the other day. A lot of those Ring cameras should have caught him.
Maybe their property is so big, though, that it doesn't reach out to the street.
That's true.
You know what I mean? Like there's a long driveway entrance.
Yeah, true. But Paul is on the suspect list, of course, as is Sam. Sam is going to inherit not half of the money, but all the money, and possibly a life insurance policy as well. $20 million life insurance policy, right? And but Paul is, Coop is also on the suspect list because of the fight he got into with Paul at Nick's party. I also find it funny that even Nick doesn't know exactly what the root cause of the argument is. If people had understood that it was definitely the accusation about Sam, then of course that would make this much tighter investigative loop. But I do like the fact that it's all pretty quiet stuff. I also like Nick's assessment when he's being questioned that if Coop was going to punch anyone, he would have punched me. So I don't think he's just a hothead. But it is interesting that connection there, that maybe that does show that Coop at least has become a little more emotionally driven, something that, of course, he hasn't been in the past. What do you think about Elena? Elena, how do you pronounce her name? Is
Elena,
continuously
yes.
trying to reach out to Coop, and I know Coop's with his family and stuff, but he's. I need to understand. This is another thing that maybe is a nitpick here on the show. I need to understand his psychology a little bit because when he's being questioned by the cops, he is cold as ice and has an excuse for everything and is very calm after literally being confronted with a body. He's nearly sociopathic or in some kind of deep, deep denial. But I need to understand his psychology a little bit. And then once again, I can understand him wanting to like disconnect from the situation at large when he's trying to pretend like everything's normal, hanging out with his family and going on this college road trip. But given what's just happened when like Sam and Elena are texting him, I'd want to check those texts like stat.
Yeah,
like just go use the bathroom and check your messages.
Yeah. You know what it's reminding me of is in White Lotus, the Jason Isaacs character, who actually reminds me of John Hamm, or John Hamm reminds me of him, whichever it is, having the discipline to be like, take my phone. I don't want to know anything that's going on. I mean, in that particular case, he was possibly plotting some sort of murder-suicide, but
there was a separate ulterior motive there.
But just this idea of my world could be exploding, but I'm just going to turn off my phone is an interesting form of discipline or self-destructiveness. I'm not sure what it is.
I mean, once again, it could make sense with his character that he is in this manic phase, or I don't know the actual diagnosis for it, but that he's in this fugue state or something where he's in his own reality and he doesn't want the realities of the outside world to intercede. But he seems to be two characters, right? There's this like loving family man. There's the defending Elena's honor last week in that situation. And then there seems to be this guy who's just like pretending like this craziness is not actually happening around him. And that delusional self and that more pragmatic self is not the same character. And somehow the John Hamminess of it all, he's able to pull it off. But I need the show to explain him a little bit better because this is not like no one would be this poised in breaking into people's homes and then lying to the cops in their face. And but then also now you could be like a pure sociopath and be like that person all the time, sure. But the duality of him is not well defined here, and maybe that is what the show is about. I hope so, because
it's like in psychology terms, there's the fight or flight response, right. And now I think there's also a freeze response, and he's having the fight, the flight, and the freeze response. Like it's like a carousel, which one he chooses.
Exactly. That's what makes him sociopathic. The fact that he can like rationally decide his reaction in the moment is
which way will I disassociate from this situation?
Yeah. Exactly. It's not the way psychology works. But and I do hope, like I said, it's like sociopathic to be able to be that cold in deciding when you are like life and death circumstances. So but that doesn't seem to be the person he is with his family, for example. So once again, that could be thematically what the show is about. And I do hope that it does address it in some way. I mean, to once again, not to beat a dead horse here, but to compare it to something like Breaking Bad, you did see the emergence of this supervillain from this, the Walter White character, but that's him discovering that about himself over time. And also it is a performance for the big chunk of that show before he actually becomes that character, right? And even then at the end, he is never purely the sociopath, right? Like as soon as he truly embraces that, he backs away from it or is afraid of himself, right? We don't see the John Hamm character here, Coop, dealing with that, like, oh my God, I am capable of murder. He's just kind of like, I'm capable of murder right now, and in 5 minutes I'll be a loving dad.
Yeah, let's get ice cream.
Yeah, there's no struggle in those two things, which once again, that could be what the show's about. So maybe we'll get to it eventually.
But like you said, from a guy who up until a month ago 2 months tops at this point, right? Was just living his life as a finance bro.
And a rule follower, right? Like I've never cheated, like prides
Right.
himself on being like a moral, on the
Right.
moral high ground, which by the way, I like that. As you know, he breaks after playing by the rules, everything breaks. And he's like, hey, I'll break all the rules. But I need to see him wrestle with that in some way, of him flipping that switch and
Right.
like throwing himself into it, instead of just, like you said, casually being like, I am totally amoral, and even if people die in my wake, I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
And then 5 minutes later, being like, I'm so disappointed that my son is snorting drugs at school. I'm
Right.
like, well, I don't know. Like, if once you've got down, like once you become a murderer, you kind of accept the fact that other people can make moral compromises as well. I would hope, I would assume. What do you make about this ongoing, what the show's trying to tell us about this ongoing dynamic between Sam and Coop? I still can't really figure that out either. There is this conversation where she tries to warn Coop about him being possible suspect after she's been questioned. There's a perfect example, by the way, the show getting it right, where Sam in the room is saying all the right things. And she's like, I actually have to leave. And then immediately you see her start to panic when she walks out the door, which is a very natural response to being in this circumstance and realizing that you are a prime suspect, and realizing that the relationship with Coop is now suddenly going to look a lot worse. All of these things, right? And she doesn't even know that Coop was in the house that night. If they find that out, of course, now it's going to really feel like she left town and set this up and Coop killed the guy, right? Like it could very well read that way if he leaves breadcrumbs behind, clues back at the house, which of course is all part of, and he should theoretically, if he wasn't a pure sociopath, he should be like, oh my God, is my DNA there? The guy's dead. They're investigating this. They're questioning me. And he's just kind of like, well, I got to go. I got to go on this trip with my family. He's too casual about all of this. But yeah, like I said, Sam is much more realistic in her reaction to this.
Well, I do think we've seen before, I can't remember which show we discussed it in context with. There could be a form of denial of, well, I know I didn't do it, so why would I be worried? Right? Even though, yes, you broke into the house and you were at the crime scene and tried to clean it up. But the point is, like, he didn't murder the guy. And so there could be like a false confidence of, well, I didn't do it, so I have nothing to worry about.
But potentially his involvement in these break-ins might have led to Paul's death, right? So all of this, and even
I don't think that's occurred to him, though, the same way he was shocked when the cleaning lady got fired, right?
Maybe it speaks to his, the show is trying to comment on his own overinflated privilege. But once again, all that is to say that I actually need the show to grapple with these things, and maybe that's exactly what it's setting up here. So I do hope that it does develop these more. But going back to the relationship between Sam and him, what do you think about this conversation where he again shows himself to be, when it's not about him and his family, his blood family, and of course his original marriage, when it's not about that core group of people, which interestingly, of course, we see them reunite in this particular episode, he seems to be pretty callous when Sam is talking to him about her circumstance. He's immediately like worried about him being potentially a suspect. And Sam, of course, is so frustrated again with him and hangs up the phone. And he tries to, in the last second, be like, oh no, I'm worried about you too, honey. And she's like, shut up, which of course is what he does over and over again. But what do you think the show is trying to tell us when we see these interactions? Like, she tests him and he fails. She tests him and he fails. What do you think that's trying to say about him or about her relationship with him?
I mean, I think we're alternately seeing him as perhaps very self-involved, right?
Yeah.
Not really realizing, and that carries through to what I was just saying, that like he has convinced himself that everything he's doing is a victimless crime. And I don't think it's occurred to him that there are victims, even, as we said, they kind of gave him an easy excuse for the cleaning lady thing. No one liked her anyway. They wanted an excuse to fire her. So there's that. There's also the idea that's been planted of he doesn't understand when people are asking him for things emotionally, right? Like That's just not his language with people. So he didn't know he was supposed to fight for his marriage. He didn't know he was supposed to argue with Sam when she says, I think we're done here. Like he just doesn't take cues from people in that way. I don't think it necessarily speaks to what's going on inside him internally. It's just he's not getting it, which brings me back to that self-involved thing. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I am actually not certain. That's why I was curious to get your take on it. It definitely is setting up over and over again this realization that Sam has to make about him, that maybe he could, and maybe that's a wound for her, that she sees that he is very considerate of this woman who cheated on him, that and everybody around him, and then he is in this relationship with her, and she is probably putting more. It has more emotional attachment to him than he has to her, but she in a way gets to see that he can be that person when it comes to like, oh, he's very concerned about what's Mel's, like he's very thoughtful about the gift he gets to Mel and knows how to push her buttons in good ways and bad ways, but that he has this level of thoughtfulness for them. And
the capacity is there.
Yes.
Yes.
And then like you see him like with like I mentioned in last week's episode, where he's like, and this is where the show is actually well written. That whole interaction where he goes, oh yeah, next when I come back, we should really go, when you come back from visiting your family, we really should go into the city and spend some time together, go on like a proper date. And that he's trying to do it, but she knows that he's just not, he's just saying it to say it. He doesn't actually want that to happen. So she knows that if she tests him, and of course she does, that he'll fail. And that's an extra salt in the wound, because she knows that he's very concerned about what's up with Mel emotionally. And of course, he can't extend that to her. I still just don't know what that is setting up in the show.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
And then we get into the heart of the episode, which is this reprieve from all of his drama, which he intentionally, of course, we see him ignoring the calls and the contacts, which again it says something about his character for sure, that he theoretically, if you have to assume internally, he knows that when Elena and Sam are reaching out to him continuously, that should indicate something potentially bad is happening. Something's been discovered. Like when Elena's texting him, is she saying, the maid just called me and told me they found your fingerprints at the scene of the crime? And he's just like, don't want to deal with this right now. So it obviously shows this very deep denial that he's in.
Yeah, but to go back just for 30 seconds to your other point about how he can show up for his family. I mean, but historically he didn't, right? Like,
true. That's a good point.
So I think it is consistent with his character, because they're all saying now, where was this version of you 5 years ago?
Right.
So I don't think it's an inconsistency. I think it's, once he's lost it, then and that final monologue is about that, right? About the things you lose along the way, to go back to the title. That once he realizes what he's lost, and there's another reference to that as well somewhere in that episode, now he values it, and now he wants it back. So I don't think it's inconsistent necessarily.
Yeah, I think it's trying to square that circle. I'm not sure if it's done it so far, but yeah, a very good point you bring up that I hadn't considered about him having that narration at the end, because the getaway with the family kicks off with this really pretty potent sequence in the car where he gets in there and he's all happy-go-lucky, and Mel says, oh, you're very happy today. And he's like, always. And she's like, always? Really? That's not the version of you I'm familiar with. But she does question that. But then, of course, within moments, we have the teenagers in the car, and she's saying to him, like, you don't know anything about love. So how do you know that I'm not going to be with?
That's what I was thinking of just now, that reference.
Yeah.
Yes.
The boyfriend for long term. And he says, I love when he says, you don't know what you have lost. You don't know what love is until you lose it. And of course, immediately you're thinking he's talking about Mel, and Mel probably thinks so as well. But more importantly, he's talking about, like, I remember, and this really got to me, by the way, because of course we're all going to go through this in our lives. I remember, I think about this, by the way, with my daughter, that, I remember you
Mm-hmm.
being that little girl holding my hand. And she already is, has her own friends. And she, of course, we are her rock of stability. But we're no longer the whole entire world to her, and we no longer just the thought of her hand in my hand, as a child, is something that is already different now. I can only imagine when she's 17, 18 years old, and she wants to obviously be an adult and be in her own world, and the loss of who she was as a child, right? So he's like, I deal with that loss every single day, and it's something you can't possibly imagine. So that one really cut me to the quick.
Yeah, we actually were having a conversation coincidentally earlier this week where my husband had a conversation with somebody about how much teenagers hate their parents. And,
Mm-hmm.
Because said, oh, do you have kids? Yes, I have an 8-year-old. And, oh, they love you so much now, but wait till they get to
Right.
be teenagers. And it's just like they're telling you F you every single day.
Right.
And my husband said to me in this quiet voice, is that going to happen? I mean, he still holds my hand.
Exactly.
And it just, it hurts. Yes, knowing what could be coming down the road.
I remember when my wife was pregnant and we watched the first Inside Out movie. And there's a scene where she's losing all her memories of childhood. And we both burst into tears and we're like, she's going to forget us one day. It comes for us all. It comes for us all.
It does.
Yes. So then the trip kicks off, obviously. The really interesting scene. I love that scene once again. And then the most of it still shows still awkwardly trying to. This was a little weird that in trying to build this dynamic, these four people together have not been in interacting collectively before. And I like the brother and sister have a good dynamic. Mel and Coop have a good dynamic, but the four of them together didn't really feel right. But now that I'm thinking about it, maybe that's all intentional too, because when you're hanging out with your teenage kids, it's not going to be like all good times. It is tough, of course, because they're going through everything all at once at that age.
Mm-hmm.
I do like how he sets things up. Of course, she wanders off right away, the daughter, and they're trying to convince the son that, yes, he does indeed want to go to college. They set him up with him having access to this production studio. And it's kind of, this is how you communicate with teenagers. I thought this was also very well realized, that you have to kind of not give them stuff, because if you give them stuff, they think you're trying to buy them off, but you have to kind of know who they are and let them be that thing and then leave them alone. And I think they do appreciate this circumstance, especially the daughter, who ends up hooking up with this nerdy guy, or almost hooking up with him. And then she kind of realizes, I think dad might be right, that I'm not actually going to be with my boyfriend long term. But of course, Mel and Coop spend a lot of time together. And not only do they reconnect, and we see that there is still passion there in their relationship, much more interestingly is that they both, maybe unaware of each other, that they both like to transgress, right? Not only is he, of course, become this thief,
Mm-hmm.
we already know that Mel has this rage inside of her, and she's been keying
Mm-hmm.
cars and such. She steals, like, some petty theft here herself, which is interesting to see that they have that in common. And it does allow him to be slightly honest with her about him having lost his job.
Which is a big truth to tell.
Right. But he does lie, of course, just like Barney last week, by the way, speaking of
Yes.
parallels, that, oh, yeah, we're fine. Everything's good, though, financially. Just letting you know, which, of course, is, I guess he got halfway there. And Barney
Mm-hmm.
also got halfway there, but couldn't quite get all the way there. What do you think about her saying to him that she has not seen this side of him in 15 years of marriage? It's the most honest interaction they've had.
So I loved all of the scenes of them together at Princeton. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was fun to watch. I thought it it showed a lot about their relationship. I do believe she hasn't seen that side of him in 15 years, but I don't think it's a one-way street, which is, how I feel about so many aspects of their relationship, or maybe the central aspect of their relationship is, as a couple, you have to find that time to be who you were before you were fully grown up and you had kids and you had all these obligations, right? And that's why some couples have the idea of a date night or whatever.
Mhm.
You know, we particularly don't really have that. We go out if we have time, I but it's just like that playfulness. You kind of have to put in an effort to preserve that, which seems contrary to the idea of playfulness. But you've got to give yourself opportunities to still remain those people and have access to that part of who you are. So I believe she hasn't seen it, but I don't believe it's entirely because he closed it off. I think, their life became such that they didn't give themselves the chance to remember who they used to be.
Yeah, and of course there is this moment where we see like this was what the family could be. We even see a little flashback, right, to them as children in the car going for a ride together, which you've seen these little flashes here and there throughout the show. But again, indicating that this was this reprieve for them. What did you think of? Of course, they actually do. Coop and Mel get to spend time together. Nick is wary of this, by the way, ahead of time. So he knows that something could potentially happen. I do wonder if there will be consequences in the relationship with Nick after this, but they end up hooking up, of course. And then afterwards, and their afterglow, he says to her, like, it could be like this again. And she makes it sound like it's too late. That has passed. So what did you think of, do you think they're setting up that this could somehow rekindle their marriage? Of course, we're discovering that she has these impulses to transgress as well. He even has this fantasy of let's just drive away and like leave our lives behind and rebuild all over again. And she's like, that can't be. And my question is, why can't that be at that point? And I don't mean just financially, but obviously we've discussed this before. If he liquidated everything he had and they downsized, they could have a very successful life, and he could rebuild the practice somewhere else if he wanted to and make good money and in a different location, in a different arena. So is that telling us that they're so committed to being on this track that they can't even imagine this alternate life? Or she can't, I should say.
So the practical part of me is saying, well, of course, you're not going to pull your kids out of this amazing school, and the one is about to graduate and hopefully go to Princeton, right? So the practical part of me is saying these are the reasons that they can't just up and move. But I do think there is some rekindling of their relationship going on. I don't think it will be immediate, but I think it's not unusual to hear about couples who separate and then get back together in middle age, right? That everyone's kind of going through their crap. And then once they get through the other side, they realize, hey, I still really love this person and I think we can make it work. That wouldn't surprise me if that was the outcome here. I also think, though, his impulse to leave it all behind, we know, is because he has created such a mess.
Sure.
Right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's not really the idea of, well, we had our priorities in the wrong order and let's start from scratch with this new set of family values. It's that I've made such a mess, I want to run away and leave it all behind and start over.
Right.
And I don't know if she senses that, but that's not a thing that is generally a good idea.
You're right. He is saying, can we just leave it all behind because of his current circumstance? And she's talking about, they have two different contexts here. But I was interested in her context.
He doesn't know the mess he's made.
Right. But I didn't know I'm curious about her context specifically, in that she's saying that it's not possible, because it is possible, right? I mean, that's something that is, I think, thematically in this show, that he specifically says to the kids, the nice thing about being teenagers is that anything you do can be undone. Mm-hmm. And, and I think that is the context, again, for Mel saying, like, we can't go a different route now, because Tori, the daughter, says, I think that's true anytime in your life. There's a very sage thing for her to say that I think it's true for you to do anytime in your life. It's just that when you're older, it's harder, right? Like you're more ingrained. There's
Yeah, I agree
more,
with
you
that.
have more baggage, but it is possible, right? And
Yep,
he's like
for
that.
sure.
And that's, but I think that is what we're seeing here, right? Like these are people who are unable to break their patterns, but not because, and in this case, getting himself deeper and deeper into a worse situation, not because it's not possible to downsize, to change your priorities, to start a new career. It's just difficult, and people don't want to do the difficult thing, right? And yeah, I guess all those chickens are going to come home to roost. And of course, they start coming home right now in this particular episode by the end of it. There is a very sweet moment where you see the family showing up and they run into Barney and his family. And you see, like, oh, this is how it used to be, right? Them all hanging out together. It seems like
Mm-hmm.
even in these interactions, it's very nice to see, like, the kids haven't seen each other in a while. So it's all like, oh, we used to all hang out together. It's so nice. And you kind of get this moment where you see what their family could have been like and what their lives could have been like. And of course, we had that very, very heavy-handed narration, which I do have a criticism here. I have liked the narration, and I like when narration. I actually don't have the issue that some people have with narration, but narration should do something different than the story is doing. It's also how I feel about music. I don't like when music is like there's a sad scene and the music's like cry now, like it cues you to the
Mm-hmm.
same
Mm-hmm.
emotion. I like when music does something a little bit different, adds something to a scene. Same thing with narration. I like when the narration subverts what you're expecting or adds some context to what you're seeing. This was like so on the nose where it's like what we're seeing on the screen and what we're hearing in the narration are exactly the same thing. And I bumped up against that a little bit in this particular episode. But of course, the payoff is that he goes out to the car to get umbrellas, I guess it is, and ends
Yeah.
up getting beaten up by these thugs. And the art dealer is still in play here.
Kind of weird that they found him too, because they make clear they're in Mel's car.
All right,
And
good
this
point.
wasn't
Yes,
like a typical, like every Friday we have dinner at the diner. Like it wasn't like that. They just decided spur of the moment to stop there. Just strange that, I mean, I guess it's not the biggest town, but still.
they might have done their reconnaissance, and they're like, that's some pretty thorough reconnaissance, by the way. That they'd be like, we're looking for him. Where could he be? Hold on a second. He's on a trip with his wife. So let's look for Mel's car. We found Mel's
Right.
car. I mean, he doesn't, they don't even seem to have been there very long, right? So maybe they've been following the car for a while. But yeah, it does seem all very coincidental in a way. And of course, Barney gets the worst of this. Now, they don't run Barney over, right? These were two black cars. That's why I got confused. It's not them. It's just a random car that hits
Yeah,
Barney
I
in the
think
street,
just
right?
a terrible timing. That was my sense of it watching it.
Yeah, because then I was sort of confused as to like, because it's two black cars or dark cars anyway, and I'm like, is this the same car? But that wouldn't make sense, right? For them to be rolling casually by as the bodies in the street if they were the ones who just struck this guy in the street. Yeah, presumably the cops will show up pretty quickly. So this is all of this seems very public for this beating to have occurred right in front of the restaurant.
Yeah.
I'm
But did you
curious.
see that ending coming? I did not.
No, you know what? I suspected something bad was going to happen when he walks out to the car. I suspected
Yes. Then it
yeah.
had the feeling that he was going to get hit by a car or something like that.
Right, right.
Yes.
Yeah. It was only in the final moments that I assumed
And
that
I
they were.
definitely didn't expect poor Barney to
Oh, I
get
know. No,
involved.
definitely not Barney. Yeah. So very curious about how that all goes. Okay, a few follow-up questions here. A couple of things I forgot to mention, and then some speculation on the future. First of all, one thing I forgot to mention, which I think is very interesting, is Allie performing
Mm-hmm.
at the
Yeah.
bar.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw, once again, I forgot to mention this last week, but she did show up at Nick's gym and is, well, I guess we mentioned it briefly, and
Yeah, we
is
talked about it.
maybe stalking her ex
Right.
again. But more interestingly, the ex is interested in her. So what do you make of this turn of events?
You know, it's not unusual for men to love women that are a little bit unstable. That's that's the politest way I can put it.
But he has like a restraining order against her, right? And now he's coming to hang out with her at the, I don't know, this, he's playing with fire here, especially given their history.
I agree, but also not surprising to me. To me, that's believable.
Yes, unfortunately true. Yes. Do you think there's going to be any fallout between Mel and Nick as far as this the hookup with Coop? Like, is she going to tell him? Is she going to be uncomfortable around him, and he's going to figure it out, or at least feel that something happened? Do you think this? Do you think that's going to pay off?
I don't think she's going to tell him unless she wants to break up with him, and then I think she will.
Right. Good point.
He
Do you
does seem like a in-tune person that might notice that the vibe is off, though.
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about it because of the fact, like, he kind of says, how's it going to be when you're with him? This, and Mel being like, no, of course not. But yeah, we already know that Mel had that emotional reaction to eating those Red Hots last week. Do you think
that lady's obsessed with atomic fireballs? It came up again in this episode.
Oh my gosh, she ate the whole bag of them.
It's going to tear up your tongue, don't you think?
Yeah, that's true, right? You can't taste anything else after that. Do you think that Coop and Sam have a future together in any way?
I don't. I really don't. What do you think?
I don't think so either. I think at this point, this is kind of a breaking point. They probably cannot start hooking up with each other more publicly or try to spend more time together given the murder investigation. So, I mean, that's just going to be another way to keep them apart.
Yeah. And now she's got to focus on her kids. Their dad was just murdered.
Yeah.
I mean, she was already focused on her kids. I'm not saying she wasn't, but that's a lot, right? For your father to be murdered.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, even if they have a bad relationship with him, that's obviously traumatic, to say the least.
Yeah.
And he did seem like, she even says that he's had a pretty decent relationship with them anyway. Another question mark I have here, by the way, I could have sworn and I have not been able to confirm this, but I could have sworn that they mentioned the fact that her birthday party, I'm going to go back to that birthday party again. The birthday party was a 40th. But then I'm like, the math doesn't make sense that it's a 40th birthday party when you consider the fact that the guy at the bar said he's 41. I always thought you were younger than me. You. And she goes, well, thanks for saying that, but I know you're lying. So she's saying, I definitely am more than 41. And you know that, right? So that doesn't make sense. And then, of course, we know that Coop did say his age. He said he was 46. And then I had this question mark. Didn't they meet in college? Now we explicitly tell us they did meet in college. So they have to be within, I mean, you could be a freshman and a senior in college, but you would assume that it wasn't just like a 6-month relationship. They probably were there for a while. That was part of their courting. So they have to be within a year or two of each other. So then maybe she's 45. Maybe it's 45th birthday. Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, or maybe these, clearly Nick has a ton of money, and maybe for him, this is a typical birthday party. That seems completely unhinged, but maybe.
Well, everybody seems to be like, this is really him going above and beyond, but it could be going back to the idea that you have that Nick might feel that there's something going on with her. Might be losing her to Coop, but maybe just in general, it could just be like, maybe it's her 46th birthday. Maybe she's also 46. And he's just like, it's even more silly, right? That it's not a 50th or something. It's just him overcompensating, like trying too hard because he is feeling like he might be losing her. Right. By the way, this scenario plays out almost identically in the Four Seasons. So maybe that's another thing that's adding context to my expectations there.
Interesting.
And also similarly, it's like someone overcompensating for a failing relationship. Oh, and one more thing is I think this is definitely going to play out in the next episode. As a matter of fact, I think it might even be called out in the little blurb of what to expect next week, that we see Elena and her brother, and they're introducing this dynamic between the two of them. Even though he doesn't do anything shady in this particular episode, I do have a feeling that he's going to start becoming a problem for her as well. So that's definitely something that's going to develop over the next few episodes. Anything else I missed?
Well, one thing I thought was interesting is that when Mel stole the jam, I assumed that Coop knew she had it and was covering for her. But in fact, he was surprised later that she had taken it. And I thought that was interesting that he didn't see that in her, that maybe she took it. He was surprised that she took it.
Yeah, I actually understood that in that I don't think, and I think this is one of the things that is that is being explored in the show pretty well, I think, is that he didn't see this side of her. And that maybe because he wasn't paying attention, like he literally says that to her here, that even before she started cheating on him, that he had checked out of the marriage. So I think that
Yes.
there is some aspect of it that he hadn't really seen her, which of course is part of the attraction that she has with him now, is that this is a version of a husband that maybe was there early on, or maybe was never there at all, and now she's seeing a different version of him, and they're kind of discovering each other. But I very much read when he, especially when he like threatens the guys.
See, to me, that reaction was so over the top. It could only be because he did think she had it. That if you really believe she didn't take it, you'd be like, whatever, guy, you want to see her purse? Fine.
Yeah. I can read that both ways, but yeah, I see what you're saying, that she made a big front about it.
Yeah, like if you really believe she didn't take it, then just let it take its course and everyone will go about their way, right? Like it is insulting. I get that. If she didn't take it, but she did.
Right.
But you would just say like, oh, this is a misunderstanding. Fine. I guess it also speaks to like he's a little hair trigger right now, but
What did you think about him then in response to that, breaking into the church and them having that little romp there and being caught but him taking the communion wafers for her to eat with the jam?
I mean, I thought it was a great scene. I am not a religious person, and even if I were, I'm not Christian. Seems very offensive.
Yeah, I think that this would be an offensive thing for a lot of people to see that. I did wonder how audiences will react to this, because for me, it was a little overwritten, like a little, a pretty significant transgression for them to, he could have done something a little more timid instead of this. But in a way, it's not that bad, because it's kind of a public place, although stealing the wafers is kind of sacrilegious, let's say, although they're not consecrated, and this is just Catholic religion, but they're not like considered holy until they've actually been blessed. They're not blessed until the mass, so they're just wafers at that point. So and he would know this as a former altar boy, so he would know how this worked. So maybe it's not as bad, but it does look like it's obviously something that is almost like stealing something, and then trying to almost get interrupted when they were about to have sex in the church. In the church itself. Exactly. Yeah. So obviously it's all about transgressing, but maybe that's telling us something too. It's not only about him needing the thing. We already know that he enjoys it, but not only that, it's like about doing it and maybe getting caught, right? So that is part of the allure of this decisions that he's making. But like I said, I need to feel that within him. Like even in his narration, he'll say, I'm starting to enjoy this. I'm starting to get better at this. The chase is part of the thrill. He's saying these things, but I need to understand him a little bit better. And I think the show needs to explain him to me a little bit more. Because a lot of what he's doing now still seems to be like he needs the money, and there are better ways to get that money, safer ways for sure to get that money, and more money, by the way. That's the other thing. If he's like, but I can get $1 million and I'm greedy, it's like, no, you're not making that much money off of all these thefts, and you're taking a lot of risk. So I'm still curious to see exactly how he
pretty dire consequence by the end of this episode.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, that's another question I had for you. So what do you think happens to Barney? Do you think Barney is really seriously injured, or do you think this is just going to, he'll just have a bump on his head and he'll be out of the hospital in a day or two, and then he'll be like, man, I'm so sorry. I'm inadvertently getting you into this situation. Do you think there's going to be serious consequences for Barney?
Maybe I need to watch the scene again. I thought Barney was dead.
Oh, I don't think he's dead. No, I don't think
no.
he's dead. But he could be very seriously injured. Yeah. I mean, I don't think they killed off Barney. That would be crazy if Barney dies.
It would be crazy, but that was my read of the scene, but I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
I can't imagine them killing Barney just from a TV standpoint, that if his friends start to die because of his actions, I think you'd lose the audience. The audience cannot, if he feels really bad about what happened to Barney and then tries to get some kind of revenge, even if Barney's not aware of it, then you could be like, oh, he's redeeming himself, even though it's questionable. You think about Breaking Bad. There's so many people who read Breaking Bad as like, why won't they just let him make his meth? That's not the point of the show, people. But people, or like The Sopranos, and they think that Tony's a really great guy. He's such a great family man too. I'm like, yeah, he's great. But everybody, I think you're misreading all of this. But and there definitely are people who can misread this show too. But I think if his friends start dying, and for example, Sam gets arrested for murder or something, people would lose this. They're going to lose any goodwill they have for this character pretty quickly.
I hope you're right.
Yeah, I don't want Barney to die for sure. He doesn't deserve to take the brunt.
Agree.
But my guess is that this is just kind of a wake up call for him in the context of the show, and Barney is going to be out of the hospital relatively soon. He might be convalescing at some point, and then there'll be that'll tie into like the wife will feel bad about the financial strains on him, and him, and maybe he'll be heroic in the eyes of her family and like seeing him in a new light. So maybe there could be some positive blowback. I think this is all part of his character development. In other words, I don't think this is going to be them killing him off or permanently sidelining him in the show. But I guess we'll know more next week. We got four more episodes of this.
Okay.
I guess we'll see. And then I don't know what we're going to be watching, Sona. I'm going to raise the topic here with you, and you can start thinking about it now. So we have your friends and neighbors for 4 more weeks after this. And here's some of the things that are coming up at the end of May. As you mentioned, there's just so many things to watch right now. This is all happening before the end of May, which is the cutoff for the Emmy Awards. So that's why everything's packed in here. So here are some things we can discuss the following week. This is after your friends and neighbors wraps up. And you don't have to decide now, but you can consider it for the future. So first of all, there's a show called Better Sister, The Better Sister. This is a binge. It's based on a best-selling novel. It is directed by Craig Gillespie, who is the same director as Your Friends and Neighbor, or at least the first few episodes. I believe he directs the entirety of this series. And it's about a sister who has a dysfunctional younger sister who works for her. There's a murder, and that these two sisters have to come together to solve the murder, and supposedly has a very good twist ending. This is a novel adaptation. So that's option number 1. Option number 2, also a binge. It is a new sitcom that's supposedly very good called Adults. And it is taking place in New York City, a bunch of millennials living together. It's been described as a new Friends for this new era, but darker. So that's a darker comedy. It's still a comedy, but like a more cynical than Friends. And very good buzz on this, by the way. And the last possible thing we could cover here is a film called Mountainhead, which written and directed, the first feature film directed by the creator of Succession, which has Steve Carell and a bunch of other famous people in it, which is about a bunch of billionaires who are holed up together in some mountain compound. But apparently something catastrophic has happened in the world economy. So it's a very black comedy about maybe the world we live in at this time. So your choice, which one of those 3 you want to cover at that point.
Of the 3 you described, I would prefer Adults, I think.
I think that'll be your favorite of the 3 as well. So
yeah, feels more my vibe.
Okay, so let's assume we'll watch that. I also think that if it's going to be a binge, these are probably shorter episodes, so it'll make it easier to binge.
Yes.
So let's assume that the week after Your Friends and Neighbors, we will be discussing Adults. The following week, a thriller on Apple TV Plus called Echo Valley, which a movie, starring Julianne Moore and Sydney Sweeney as her daughter, caught up in a mystery, the mother trying to protect the daughter. So that's one of these big Apple movies.
Sounds interesting.
For the year, which is premiering there. The following week after that, The Bear, the final season of The Bear.
Right.
And then I think we have our week to week. You did like Blackbird. Are you correct? Did you like Blackbird?
I did, yeah. I enjoyed that.
The same folks who made that series, same creator, same star, are in a show called Smoke. There is a serial arsonist. There's an investigator who believes this is a serial arsonist. And then this is very much like Blackbird in its theme. somebody publishes a book that has details of these arsons, has details that perhaps he shouldn't have, that would indicate that he might be the serial arsonist. So this investigator believes this person is, basically rubbing it in the face of the investigators that you never caught me. And then so it's a cat and mouse between this person who is publicly stating that maybe I'm this guy. And then it's the whole question as to, is it him or is he just a fabulist? Is that more intriguing? The psychological aspects of that, maybe?
I mean, I love the psychological stuff. Maybe. Who's in this again?
It's the same star, Taron Egerton.
Maybe.
Okay. I don't know what else is on the board at that point. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. That's the only thing that's been announced so far for the summer. And Apple TV Plus, like I actually just mentioned this on my most recent conversation with Darren. The summer months for us here on the podcast are usually bad. Like it's very hard to find stuff to talk about. However, we have found things to talk about. And it's always because Apple TV Plus, they don't care about the calendar. They just put stuff out, because even when the summer was a dead spot and there was nothing to watch, they had the conversation. They had the series that was getting the conversation in the summer. The first year we did it, they had the show Silo. I know you didn't watch that show, and it wasn't that good, in my opinion, but it's become a big hit for them. They just had the third season or the second season of it just wrapped up recently, and it's become a big hit on the show. So that was a hit first on the podcast as well when I was covering it here. But then the following year, they had Hijack, and Hijack became a buzzy show.
That was fun. Yeah.
And the year after that, and they also had Blackbird that same year, which also became a pretty big hit. And then the following year, they had Presumed Innocence. So they seem to be also like, fun. When nobody's putting anything out, they seem to put out a show that does create some buzz. So I'm hoping that Smoke might be it. I mean, to be totally honest with you, I mean, this is, of course, my preference. If the same exact show, Smoke, was being produced, which of course is based on true story, and this was a serial killer, I'd be 100% in.
Yeah, right.
But a serial arsonist, I'm like, I don't know if I'm as into it as that. But everything else I like. That the fact that this guy's like publishing books that reveal his own crimes, like that's all really fascinating stuff.
I wonder if it's a fireman. You always hear about firefighters. Well, not you always hear about
those firefighters.
Can't go a day without hearing about a firefighter arsonist. Sometimes you hear about a firefighter that is an arsonist that is kind of like trying to save the day, right?
You set a fire so they can put it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are all things possibly in the future. And of course, Poker Face will be on for the entire summer. So maybe we'll dip into it here and there.
Nice.
Very entertaining so far. Oh, man, I totally forgot this one too. I mean, also another option if you wanted to do this, by the way. It as an alternative, because it starts at the end of this month, is Nine Perfect Strangers is back again. So
of course.
If you, I didn't even mention that one, but yes, that is an option as well. So, and that
we'll wait for reviews on that one.
Yeah. I feel the same way. Yeah. But that would be like 2 months. So that would basically get us through the roughest part of the summer. I guess we'll have to wait and see all that. All right, Sona, thank you once again for the conversation.
Thank you. Talk to you later.
All right, talk to you soon.